In a phone conversation with his father, 25-year-old Wade Wilson confessed to mentally committing his heinous act, explaining that he wanted to make the girl look like spaghetti. This is how he described the moment when he ran over 43-year-old Diana Ruiz from Florida with his car. This was the second murder committed by Wilson in just one day. Earlier that same day, he had strangled Kristen Melton, whom he met in a bar. It took almost 5 years to investigate these crimes, and only in June 2024 did a jury decide on Wilson's death penalty. However, even this severe punishment is unlikely to console the families of the victims who lost their loved ones at the hands of this man, whom many consider a tattooed psychopath. In October 2019, the lives of 35-year-old Kristen Melton and 43-year-old Diana Ruiz, who lived in one of the cities in the state of Florida, Cape Coral, tragically intersected due to a meeting with Wade Wilson. Although the women did not know each other, this fatal acquaintance became pivotal for both of them. The following months after their deaths attracted enormous attention from the media and ordinary people, including on TikTok, where many even try to defend the guy. Watch. Today, we will examine why and what pitfalls exist in this case, because you are on my channel, where we occasionally study real crimes and strange phenomena. If you like this kind of content, then subscribe, and let's dive into today's story. Kristen Melton was born and raised in Lenoir, where she met Stefani Sailors in high school, who became her best friend for many years. Kristen loved cats and traveling. Together with Stefani, they lived in several states, each time getting a job in local cafes. After Colorado, the friends moved to Florida and, as usual, began working as waitresses in the same restaurant. In Cape Coral, Melton lived in a duplex, a small house divided into 2 parts, allowing 2 families to live simultaneously. Christina not only spent the money she earned on herself, but also helped her elderly mother who lived nearby. According to Stefani, Christina and her mother were so close that they resembled 2 peas in a pod. Stefani Sailors and Christina Melton spent almost all their free time together. It was the same on the evening of October 6, 2019, when the friends decided to visit a live music show in one of the bars in Fort Myers, too. As they were climbing the stairs to the bar on the upper floor, Wade Wilson appeared before them, as if out of nowhere. He was the first to make contact, introducing himself to the friends. Stefani would later remember that he introduced himself under a false name. That evening, the man seemed friendly and even charming to her, an impression that would change dramatically after the tragic events that would soon follow. Everyone was cheerful and drunk. Nothing terrible was happening, Sailors recalled while testifying. She emphasized that she did not notice any alarming signals, usually called red flags, that evening, and that neither she nor Melton felt any threat. At that time, Wilson himself did not yet have tattoos on his face. After the bar closed, the girls, along with Wilson, went to visit a guy they had met that same evening. They spent several hours in his company, and in the morning, all 3 of them left the house. Initially, they planned to get to Melton's house, but Wilson, who was behind the wheel and under the influence of alcohol, could not properly control the vehicle. Therefore, they were forced to call an Uber. Having reached the desired address and hurrying to take her son to school, Sailors hugged her friend and said goodbye to her, agreeing to meet the next day. Unfortunately, this meeting never took place. When Stephanie went to work the next day, she could not even think that something terrible could have happened to Melton. She was sure that Christina, who had a day off on October 7th, was just resting after the party and therefore did not respond to messages and calls. However, on the same day, the police found Melton's body in her own home. She had been strangled and wrapped in a carpet. Just like Stefani Sailors, Diana Ruiz went to work on October 7th. The bar where Diana had been working for 5 years was located just 800 meters from her home. Her colleagues knew that Diana never missed shifts, so her unexpected absence from work alarmed everyone when it became clear that she had not returned home. They raised the alarm and contacted the police with a missing person report. Diana's body was found only 3 days later in a field behind one of the local bars, with signs of strangulation and a broken neck. The investigation later found out that on that fateful day, while heading to work, Diana was stopped by Wade Wilson. He convinced her that he was lost and asked for directions. Wanting to help, Diana got into his car. While driving, Wilson began to strangle her, and then, realizing that the woman was still alive, stopped the car, dragged her to the ground, and ran over her body several times, wanting to make it look like spaghetti. After that, he dragged the body into the bushes and fled the crime scene. When all the details of this case became known in court, Diana's fiancé, Scott Hannon, expressed his pain and anger. This monster was the last one to talk to her. All I can say is, I hope you rot in hell. It is important to note how modern internet technologies have changed not only the way investigations are conducted and their publicity, but also our approach to work and life in general. Today, everyone can find a case to their liking and turn it into a source of income without leaving home. Wade Wilson was arrested on October 8, 2019, the day after Kristen Melton's body was discovered. By that time, he had already managed to get to Ohio, where he broke into the home of a local elderly couple. Prior to that, local residents had seen him wandering the streets, bloodied and shirtless. According to the police report, at the time of his arrest, Wade Wilson was intoxicated. Establishing his involvement in the murder was finally possible thanks to the testimony of witnesses, including the same young man to whom they went together with Stefani and Wade Wilson after the bar. In addition, the police discovered a video recording showing Wade Wilson driving Kristen Melton's car, which he had hijacked after the murder. As it turned out, he was going to attack his ex-girlfriend and then leave Florida. The video recording from one of the angles shows damage to the front bumper of the car, resembling traces of running over a person. Therefore, it is assumed that the hijacking occurred shortly after the murder of Diana Ruiz. But the main evidence of Wade Wilson's guilt was the testimony of his father, Stephen. In a conversation on October 7th, the young man confessed to the crimes. His father recalls, he said, "I'm a killer. He was excited and wanted me to feel the same as him. He will do it again." Stephen could only believe that Wade's words were true after the second call, which Wade made later that same day. Wade Wilson indirectly confirmed his guilt in an interview with a journalist, stating that Melton herself allowed him to take her things and car, although the woman was already dead at that time. He also claimed that on the day of Diana's death, he gave her a ride to the bus stop. These confusing and contradictory statements, according to the journalist, only increased suspicions about his involvement in the murder. Numerous pieces of evidence, including video camera recordings, an unconvincing justification in an interview, witness testimony, accusations of violence from Wade Wilson's ex-girlfriends, and a phone conversation with his father in which he confessed to the crimes, allowed the prosecutor's office to open a criminal case against Wade Wilson. Nevertheless, the trial dragged on for several years, all because after Wilson's arrest and the filing of charges against him, the coronavirus pandemic began, followed by massive BLM protests, which led to numerous postponements of court sessions and examinations, significantly complicating the proceedings. While in prison, Wade Wilson radically changed his appearance. He applied several tattoos to his face, including images of swastikas. This detail could not go unnoticed by the jury. If the expensive suits that changed at each session could confuse the jury and make them doubt Wade's guilt, then the Nazi symbols tattooed under his eye unequivocally indicated the potential danger of the defendant. During the trial of Wade Wilson, new details related to the murders of the two women were revealed. The examination confirmed that Wilson attacked Kristen Melton while she was sleeping. Her attempts to defend herself led to broken nails, bruises, and brain swelling on her body, indicating a clear struggle for life. True. The situation with Diana Ruiz was different. Wilson approached her with a question about how to get to the nearest school, after which she, for unknown reasons, agreed to get into his car. This moment remained unexplained, both for the experts and for the court, since it was unclear what prompted the woman to trust Wilson, who later brutally killed her. The judge stated, "The defendant admitted that he saw fear on her face. He killed two innocent victims, one when she wanted to have a good time, the other simply on her way to work." Wade Wilson's lawyers tried to use every opportunity to mitigate the sentence for their client. They focused on the statement of the forensic experts, who could not determine with absolute certainty whether the victims were conscious at the moment of strangulation or not. However, these arguments were rejected by the court. The court emphasized that the numerous traces on the victims' bodies, such as broken nails and signs of physical struggle, unequivocally indicated that the women were aware at critical moments and tried to defend themselves against an attack by a stronger opponent. This evidence supported the prosecution and confirmed the cruelty of Wilson's actions. This monster has a sister in Indiana. A letter from her was read out in court, where she described his transformation into a monster full of addiction and asked to lock up this beast. The psychologist who testified in court noted that Wilson did not show a propensity for violence in childhood, but in adolescence, he began to exhibit aggression and paranoia. The expert suggested that Wilson suffered from an undiagnosed mental disorder, possibly schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Hearing the request from Indiana and considering the cruelty of Wilson's crime, the jury recommended the death penalty. Upon hearing this recommendation, Wade sat with an absolutely indifferent expression on his face, even smirking. The final verdict has not yet been delivered, and depending on further circumstances, Wilson may be sentenced to life imprisonment with psychotherapy. In general, the sentences were originally supposed to be handed down on July 23rd. 2. He should have already known about his future fate. But now, the sentencing has been postponed to August 27th. So I can advise you to subscribe to my Telegram channel, where I will announce what ultimately happened to him. Tot. On TikTok, which is known for its ability to quickly spread information, unusual support for Wade Wilson appeared at some point when it was already known that he was accused of serious crimes. And this, by the way, is not uncommon, but it is easy to explain. The so-called attractive villain effect plays a particularly important role in supporting Wilson. One of the reasons for this phenomenon is the charisma or narcissistic personality traits that may be inherent in criminals. Pause. These traits create an aura of confidence and determination around them, which some find attractive. Wilson, with his certain charisma and attractive external appearance, caused unexpected sympathy and participation from the audience. This phenomenon is not new and is often encountered in cases where the public tends to show sympathy for criminals, especially if they seem to be victims of circumstances or possess some kind of charisma. A man with a Nazi tattoo on his face has been sentenced to death for murdering two women, reports have said. Wade Wilson, nicknamed the Deadpool Killer, because he shares his name with the Marvel character played by Ryan Reynolds in the movie franchise, was sentenced on Tuesday by a court in Florida. Wilson, who had declined to speak to the court in Lee County earlier in the afternoon, was impassive, as he was sentenced while there was cheering and applause from the gallery, The Independent said. In June, he was found guilty of killing Christine Melton and Diane Ruiz, both from the same state, in the city of Cape Coral on 6 October 2019. He was given the death penalty for both crimes, the New York Post, NYP, said. Circuit Judge Nicholas Thompson told the court the evidence shows the murders were heinous, atrocious, and cruel, while the second murder of Miss Ruiz was cold, calculated, and premeditated. Jurors had recommended the death penalty, and Judge Thompson said Wilson's crimes were so awful he found no basis to overrule them, the NYP added. The 30-year-old, who has a swastika tattoo on his face, killed the women for the sake of killing, Assistant State Attorney Andreas Gardner told the court earlier. Wilson first strangled Melton, 35, in her Cape Coral home, where her body was found, after they had met at a live music bar. After stealing the dead woman's car, he used her phone to call his girlfriend, Melissa Montanez, 41. He assaulted her, but she refused to get into the vehicle. He then met Miss Ruiz, 43, who asked him for directions in Cape Coral and invited her into the car. When the woman tried to get out of the vehicle, Wilson strangled her before throwing her out of the car, only to get back in and run her over until she looked like spaghetti, the court heard. Ms. Melton suffered bruising to her face and body, hemorrhages on her neck, and contusions to the lungs, liver, bladder, and colon. Among others, the Independent said. Among her injuries, Ruiz suffered a nasal bone fracture, a laceration to her left breast, bruising on both sides of her body, and multiple rib fractures. Wilson's lawyers argued he suffered brain damage from drug addiction and had abandonment issues stemming from being given up for adoption by his biological parents. His adoptive parents pleaded for clemency, saying in a letter that the human is still in there. Wilson was also found guilty of grand theft, burglary of a dwelling, battery, and petit theft. In Florida, anyone sentenced to death can choose between lethal injection or electrocution.